What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the final showdown video of the season. This time it is for Super Bowl 58 San Francisco 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, and we're here with the showdown picks, lineup strategies, and advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. Welcome. I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jack. You've seen him all playoffs long. He is the owner of dfsMagic and the creator of the lineup builder at Occupy Fantasy. Jack, one final time. What's up, man? How are you?
I am doing great. I have to ask, I think this is the first time in a while you have not been doing this from Vegas, right? Is that a letdown for you, or are you still, just as excited about the props and the contests and everything, or what are your thoughts going into that?
As I get older and the more and more I see the scenes from how chaotic Vegas is this week with the Super Bowl being in Vegas, I'm fine staying home and celebrating from the comfort of my home.
All right, that's fair. I guess I didn't think about that it's there, so it's probably a whole nother level of expensive and just mass crowded. So cool, man. Well, I think we'll get into this. We're gonna do mainly showdown both sites today, right?
Yeah, so here's the plan. For those of you who've been following all season long, you know what the typical showdown videos are like. For those of you that are new, what we do, we'll talk about the injuries that impact the slate. Fortunately, there are very few, and oftentimes, as the case for the Super Bowl, we know injuries 2 weeks in advance. We will talk about low risk contests, 50-50s, double ups, head to heads. Yes, there are massive prizes on both sites, but it's still another NFL slate. So we'll discuss the best tactics for those contests. But then what most of you are here for, we'll discuss high risk strategies, sleepers, picks, constructions for the largest contests on both DraftKings and FanDuel. So Jack, let's start with the injuries. And as I said earlier, fortunately, nothing is too impactful. On San Francisco, they are fully clean and good to go. So I guess if you're a 49ers fan, that is, you can be thankful for that. As for Kansas City, there are a bunch of guys who were kind of questionable, were on injured reserve, may or may not be activated. Here's what we expect. Sky Moore was activated today. He'll join the rotation at wide receiver. Jerick McKinnon, $200 on DraftKings. Fortunately, he is not expected to play. They asked Andy Reid, and he said it's not very likely at all that Jerick McKinnon plays. They opened his practice window just in case, or maybe just to get him a playoff bonus. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but McKinnon, fortunately, will not be active, it sounds like. Joe Tooney, their guard, that is the most impactful. He will likely be out once again. We saw his absence in the AFC Conference Championship, one of the best pass blocking guards in the entire NFL. And then Kadarius Toney, who Jack, you and I have talked about seemingly every week, perpetually questionable. Andy Reid said, "We'll see." That was his response when they asked if Toney would play. Toney has been dealing with some off the field stuff too. I don't think we see him. But either way, I think the biggest news is we do not have $200 Jarrett McKinnon in Showdown.
Yeah, I think it's been a theme all year, right? We've seen amazingly DraftKings try really hard this year to not just have every single showdown with like a $400, wide receiver three or running back 1B, and it's changed the contest and the ownership quite a bit. And so I think, like you said, we're glad the field doesn't just have an easy button to jam all the studs. They're going to actually have to think. It does make the slate grosser, right? Which I think we generally like more.
I think so. Yeah, the no easy values really on either site. So it does make the slate a lot more difficult, especially for the influx of casual fans building lineups. But it does make game theory a lot easier. Jack, let's talk about the Kansas City wide receivers really quickly, since that is a point from the injury section. Sky Moore is back, and really Kansas City has reduced the rotation, stopped the games. They're really just trying to get, first of all, just get the ball into Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce's hands, and then anyone else, if they get a target, so be it. But really, it's been Valdez-Scantling leading the way with Rashee Rice. It's been Justin Watson as the wide receiver three. Richie James overtook Mecole Hardman as the gadget, slot, short pass receiver in the conference championship. They saw enough of the Hardman fumbles and gadget plays the week before. And Sky Moore, I imagine if he plays, there's still a big if, right? He was activated, but he still may not play. He'll be in that 6 to 12 route range that we saw before his injury when he was demoted. So it looks pretty straightforward. And again, not to compare them to San Francisco, but it's a pretty condensed target tree compared to what we've normally seen from Kansas City this year.
Yeah, I think we hit it in maybe one of the last showdown slates where we said Kansas City finally has predictable stacking. That's good for the short slates. I think it changes a little bit for the showdown. Obviously, it gives the field a better idea of who to play, but we are going to get very low ownership on these bad Kansas City pass catchers, and they do run routes, right? And we don't know which one's going to be. You can say the same for Noah Gray too, right? So I think there is opportunity to play those guys at low ownership. I think the biggest thing there probably, Brian, will be like contest selection, right? Like you don't need to probably be playing those guys in a 20, 40 man contest, but if you're trying to win $1 million with a unique lineup against 200,000 people, those are guys you're going to want to look at.
Exactly. So let's talk about those low risk contests. Again, 50-50s, double ups, head to heads. We refer to them as low risk contests in our ultimate guide at Occupy Fantasy. So these are contests where you just have to beat half the field to double your money. Now, if you read our showdown guide, that will be in the description as well. The link to purchase that. Still one more showdown slate this year. Plus, it'll help you think about it throughout the offseason. We go through historical data and constructions on how to win various contest types in that guide. Now, when we talk about low risk contests in that guide, two strategies, especially for DraftKings, is trying to lock up all the scoring, playing both quarterbacks and both running backs. The idea being that if there are touchdowns scored in the game, by playing that core, you will have almost all of the scoring more than likely, or playing any obvious values. However, Jack, no obvious values, as we just mentioned, and you're not really getting all the scoring with San Francisco because of Debo's rushing as well. Not to mention, it's really hard to fit those four in. So low risk contests are extremely difficult for this slate.
Yeah, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining Kansas City is just always tough for low risk because you always have Travis Kelsey, is basically if you're playing the lockable all the scoring route, you're not going to be able to play him, and he's going to get some ownership, enough that he could beat you. And because there are no obvious values, you can't jam him in. And then now we have, to your point, Rashee Rice, another funnily pass catcher, also will garner some low risk ownership. So it's just tough um, to just pick which guy is not going to get there. And then you're right on the San Francisco side, you just kind of have a similar story. You have high upside pass catchers that command a lot of volume. Um, I guess you're left with this awful choice of like, Captain McCaffrey as you should, but then make that pick, or do you get crazy and try to not do that?
Yeah, so I'm just going through it here on the site. You can't see my site on my side, Jack. But if you put McCaffrey at captain, automatically leaves you with $6,400 left per player. If we just went through this exercise of playing Mahomes, Purdy, and Pacheco, those are the core four, so to speak, of low risk contest. That leaves you with $1,700 per player. You have to play two of CEH, Noah Gray, Sky Moore, whoever you prefer in that range. And generally, punting twice is not the way to go for low risk contests. So you almost are forced to either A, fade a quarterback in low risk, which doesn't feel that great, or not play McCaffrey, the best player in NFL history. Literally, as of right now, he is the best fantasy point scorer per game in fantasy NFL history. He's in his prime, so that's a big reason for that. So if you put him in the flex, what I think, Jack, if you enter 50-50s double ups head to heads, what I think sharp people will do on DraftKings, and we'll get to FanDuel here in a second, is play probably Rashee Rice at captain because at flex, he is $7,600. Let's clear this out for a second. He is $7,600, but he's a wide receiver one. Typically, we see wide receiver ones priced at 10K plus on DraftKings. So you have Rice and Pacheco who are a little underpriced. Like their median outcome is probably higher than Samuel or Ayuk's, yet they are priced where they are. So I think those are the guys you have to look to at captain if you do decide to go this route.
Yeah, and I was just clicking that in. I agree. I think that'd be a sensible play. But even if you say Rice captain, you can't do McCaffrey both quarterbacks without basically punting twice again. You have a little more. So I think you actually have to go like Rice, Mahomes, McCaffrey, Pacheco, and like fade uh Purdy, right? Which, like you said, it's not great. That gives you 8K per player, so you could do a kicker and a punt. So yeah, I think like you said in summary, it seems like one of the worst lower slates we could have had. And like you said, if McKinnon played, automatically a good lower risk slate, right? You just
Totally.
jam him in at flex. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we see some top pros play like Richie James at $400 or use check at $800. Well, use check, I guess, isn't that much further off than CEH, but you end up, if you play one of those guys, you still end up kind of in that no man's land, that 4 to 6K range, where there's really not many playable DraftKings guys.
Yeah, because like we said, these guys have, very funneled elite skill guys, and then it's just an abyss after
Yes.
that. So, and the other thing I noticed with DraftKings is they've been pricing the kickers up quite a bit as opposed to other years. So that's not in the past. If you see a 3K kicker, you just automatically throw that in. Yeah, man. So I think that's a tough one. Any other DraftKings low risk, or do you want to switch over to FanDuel?
Nah, dude, it's tough. I think you save your allocation. We're all about contest selection here at Occupy Fantasy, but I really don't think there's much to say for low risk. If you go over to FanDuel, it is somehow worse. You have to play McCaffrey and Mahomes here, I'd imagine. Mahomes projects better than Purdy. McCaffrey, the best half-point PPR scorer on the slate. That leaves you with 9,100 per player. You almost have to punt with someone like Noah Gray here, and then your lineup doesn't look as bad, but you're still getting 1 to 2 points more than likely from a 5-man roster at one spot. And we know historically that is not the way to play FanDuel low risk. So you could build more balance, but you're leaving out a really good player more than likely.
Yeah, it's really ugly. I just wouldn't do it. If you're gonna play low risk, I think we at least came up with some viable strategy for DraftKings. Like it doesn't seem like there's a viable strategy here. I mean, even if you just try to play like McCaffrey, Mahomes, and Pacheco, yeah, 7,500 per player. You can't even play. You can play a kicker and Noah Gray. So I mean, maybe something like that, right? I mean, but you're not playing Rashee Rice. You're not playing Travis Kelce. You're not playing Brock Purdy. You're not playing Deebo Samuel. You're not playing Brandon Ayuk. Any
Yes.
one of those guys could just end you. So
Yes.
yeah,
And to that
ugly.
point, this is a great transition into high risk contests, right? Where we talk about leagues, satellites, GPPs. You can build. I think the most viable of the options is this 1-4 lineup: McCaffrey at MVP and 4 Chiefs, which is a weird construction for low risk contests, especially if you just think about this from a high level. But as we transition, the field, because of the pricing, as you've seen here, because of how the volume is distributed amongst both teams, the field will build Kansas City heavy in this game. So we're talking 4 Chiefs, 5 Chiefs on DraftKings. We're talking 3 Chiefs, 4 Chiefs on FanDuel. So I think, Jack, for those people out there who are lineup construction, stacking, game theory players, and they don't like some of the MVP options, they don't like, or they don't have a strong opinion on MVPs, they don't have a strong opinion on low owned plays, you can build San Francisco heavy lineups and start to get an edge that way.
Yeah, and I think we hit this on the last video with a team like any team that has a very concentrated tree like both of these do. You can have a situation where the guys who command the volume kind of spread it amongst themselves, but they all price themselves out. Like let's say Kansas City loses the game and Pacheco, Kelsey, Rice all do something, but not enough to be optimal. You can end up in a situation where like the lone optimal chief is like a punt, right? A punt receiver that caught a 30-yard touchdown. And the same thing for San Francisco, right? If McCaffrey, Kittle, Debo, Ayuk all kind of middle, San Francisco loses the game, you can end up with like Jawan Jennings catching a touchdown. I mean, I think it's a little less likely for San Francisco, but I think that's how those types of lineups work. Is that kind of what you're getting at with the overstacking?
Yeah, I think so.
San
Like, and
Francisco.
or maybe like Kelsey scores 3 times, right? Or Pacheco is the only scorer for Kansas City, or McCaffrey hogs all the San Francisco touches
Yep.
and opportunity, right? So it can go both ways at the end of the salary pool, but it is easily possible for that to be a thing. So yeah, so that is one way you can think about playing high risk contests for this slate. Now, the ultimate question, and Jack, I'm sure you're thrilled about this. We have McCaffrey nearing or exceeding 30% captain projected ownership on DraftKings, nearly, I believe, over 40%, close to 50% on FanDuel at MVP. That is the first question that you have to answer if you're building multiple high risk lineups for this Super Bowl slate. So, before we went live, you told me that you actually like this slate a bit, despite it having McCaffrey, and you at times throughout this playoffs discussing how tough it is to build lineups with McCaffrey on the slate. So, what are your thoughts on McCaffrey at captain MVP with his projected ownership, what the field's going to do, and how you think the best way to play it is?
Yeah, well, first I'll just say one of the reasons I liked it is we're going to channel your $1 million win here and talk about some zero quarterback. I think if you play McCaffrey, your two options are play a trash guy, right? And we talked about which ones you can use. These Kansas City pass catchers would be the obvious target, and or you can look at those kind of overstacking San Francisco, right? Or you can look at zero quarterback, and it sounds like you already were thinking that when I said it. When you have two teams with expensive funnel skill players, that opens up the opportunity that those guys could all price out the quarterbacks. And I think Brian, this is like one of the best slates I've ever seen for having those guys on both sides, and without having a rushing quarterback. That's the second data point there.
Yeah, it really doesn't get much better than that, right? And obviously, for those who don't know, the 2019 $1 million win in the Super Bowl was infamously zero quarterback. Nobody was playing zero quarterback back then. But you're right. The lack of rushing, Mahomes and Purdy have rushed more in the playoffs, but it's not like a Hurts or Lamar type of situation. Yes, they can easily get priced out, or this game can just underperform, right? We've seen both these guys have poor fantasy performances in the playoffs. Very easily for them just to not score enough, especially at their elevated price tags. Mahomes is 10-6 on DraftKings. Purdy is 10K. We've seen Purdy in the 8Ks in other playoff slates. And then on FanDuel, Mahomes is 15K, Purdy 14.5. That's the second and third most expensive players. And when you add in the fact that values are tough to come by, it's easy to see how a balanced approach with three of, let's say, Kittle through Kelsey end up more optimal than one of the quarterbacks. So zero quarterback is a fantastic way. And as I was building today, some of the better lineups that come out are zero quarterback. So I will say this, and you can back me up here or have your own takes. People may ask, how do I build zero quarterback lineups optimally? Generally, and this goes for FanDuel as well, when you have zero quarterback lineups, that generally means that obviously there's a running back in there somewhere, but there is a very high presence of a kicker, but more than likely a defense. And when we're struggling for lower owned plays, all four of those, especially on DraftKings, are going to be lower owned, under 20%. So it kind of builds itself.
Yeah, why don't we spend a minute on? I think we talk a lot about rules with stacking and rules with correlating quarterbacks. So why don't we spend a minute on? And I'll probably learn from you here. Is rules for zero quarterback lineups. So I think you said it. Kicker defense. Do you think? What do you think about things like multiple running backs from the same team, multiple pass catchers from the same team? Any thoughts on min max kind of things there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And running backs, yes, you sometimes you see multiple running backs from the same team. This is a little tougher game, but maybe you see because of CEH's price tag on DraftKings, we see a Pacheco CEH lineup with the Chiefs defense get there. But generally, you have to think about this. If no quarterback is in a lineup, it's hard for multiple pass catchers from the same team get there. Two is the max, right? And I don't even know if three has ever won. In fact, there was one slate ever. It was a Tampa Bay season opener where three pass catchers from the same team made the optimal with zero quarterback. That has never happened any other time. So yeah, once in a lifetime, you can play without it and probably be a safe rule. Max two pass catchers from the same team without a quarterback and be good to go.
I mean, I think the one that sticks out to me is, would you play on DraftKings, I guess, or FanDuel, Rashee Rice and Travis Kelsey without Mahomes?
You can because their target volume concentration is so crazy, right? They're not looking for anyone else. It's either going to Kelsey or Rice or they're running it with Pacheco. And when these guys, especially if the game is lower scoring and they both go 7 for 70, that's easily enough. That's how in my $1 million win in the 13-3 ball game, Cooks and Robert Woods in that scenario put up 7 catches, 70 yards or whatever it was. I think Cooks exceeded 100 yards and got the bonus, but Goff was nowhere near sniffing the optimal because they weren't scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, that's it. And I don't even have to ask you about the other side, Debo and Ayuk. You of course can do that because, well, same argument, and Debo has rushing upside. So in a low scoring game, like a 30-yard carry or a 1-yard rushing touchdown, goes a long way. What about I guess, do you want to spend a minute on the kicker defense stuff? So I think we talk about in general, like not using a kicker against the defense. Like, do you think that kind of stuff, or running back against the defense, does that stuff kind of go out the window a little bit on zero quarterback, or are you still sticking to it?
Yeah, once you introduce the element of a defense or a zero quarterback, rules kind of go out the window. Some weird stuff really happens. And especially when you have zero values, if none of the value players end up and you end up with a salary jam or uh, a lineup that you need multiple of these mid-range guys, sometimes you end up with anti-correlated lineups. So you have a kicker against a defense against a running back captain. Really weird stuff happens here. So I think you have to open your mind up a little bit, whether you're using optimizer rules or whether you're hand building, that if you're using zero quarterback, the pass catcher stuff makes sense. But once you get into running back versus defense, kicker versus defense, I think you have to let a lot of it fly.
Yeah, all right, I'm with you. And I was just looking at FanDuel. We have both defenses under 10. I'm checking DraftKings. I'm guessing Kansas City may get a little. Yeah, so they're underpriced, so they'll get 15, but still not bad. So yeah, I think just defense in general is probably good. Do you want to? I know you study the Super Bowl closely. Do you want to talk any notes on like just game environment, either for this in particular or just in general? Like, what do you see on Super Bowls, and how does that affect these lineups?
Yeah, specifically for our props guide that we put out in Discord this week that we do every year, we're under on a lot of defensive props, under on sacks. And so that obviously doesn't feel great But as we all know, all it takes is literally one mistake, and a defense is optimal. Pick six, fumble six, kick return, punt return, right? So that's why you're playing those teams, right? But as far as kickers, we have a massive edge in terms of projection on Bucker versus Jake Moody. So you're building one lineup, you're building multiple lineups. I think Bucker is easily the play over Moody just based on how these teams operate, when they've kicked the field goals, how they allow field goals. So Bucker is the easy play. And again, like you said on DraftKings, both are 5K plus, which is a new thing DraftKings was doing this year. We don't expect either one to get over 20% ownership because they are in that no man's land.
Yeah, I love that take. Just, I think that's one of the first things I'm going to do is go read the props guide closely because I think there's very natural overlap. So I think for anyone out there that's going to seriously allocate money to this slate, like go read the props guide, and I'm sure you'll find several ideas in there that you'll maybe help you decide, like you said, decide on which kicker to play in a single entry, or I think there's probably tons of other things in there as well. Any other like props that stick out to you that you think translate to the slate?
Yeah, it's funny because there are so many, like we said countless times, concentrated scoring options on both sides that a lot of the player props are pretty in line. I would say nothing is too off. A lot of the game props we like, nothing that really translates too much to DFS, but there are some in there that stick out. And the best example was when I won the million. The props guide was so heavy on Brady unders, so heavy on Goff unders that it made me realize, hey, maybe zero quarterback lineups are a decent idea here, or at least being underweight on the quarterbacks in DFS. So it can certainly spawn some lineup ideas. That's for sure. Jack, real quick, you went mute. I'm not sure if it's on my end or
Oh,
on
my
your end.
bad. No, it was mine. It was mine.
Okay.
Sorry. No, I was just saying you're years ahead of me on translating the props to DFS. So I think let's spend a moment maybe talking about like the large field, right? We know some people out there are going to be going after the big prizes. The contests, at least for FanDuel, like it's extra big. I don't know if DraftKings is similar. But let's just talk about like how to build for those super big contests. So why don't you lead off with DraftKings? I know you still play those contests from time to time. What are your thoughts on like how crazy you have to get in terms of, I think salary, it's kind of similar to the short slate, right? That there's like the three ideas. There's salary, there's the construction, which is like certain types of players or number of teams, and then there's the low owned plays.
For sure. So we'll talk about the low owned plays here in a second, right? And I want to get your take on FanDuel as well. Salary usage. Once you start to introduce zero quarterback and defense and kickers, we see average salary usage in winners drop pretty significantly. So I think leaving salary on the table is a great way, which may seem gross on a slate where there's so many stud options, but leaving salary is number one. The constructions, you can build some weird 2-4 lineups, 1-5 lineups with McCaffrey that most people won't hand build and even optimizers will ignore because of the way these teams are set up. So I think unusual constructions like that. We already talked about San Francisco heavy lineups being another way to get at that angle. And the low owned plays, I think there are enough that you probably have to introduce them into your lineups, and that's the easiest way to get different. But just as a reminder, and this can be a transition to FanDuel, Jack. If you play a 1 or 2% owned guy and use all the salary, you're not going to be that different. It's going to be heavily duped, as we see on FanDuel all the time. The same will be said for DraftKings when there are 470,000 entrants. You are muted once again, Jack. You're doing a great job.
Sorry, I'm really good at my IT setup today. So normally we say like at least 1K on each site, right? I think if you're gonna play a chalky captain, like I'll be honest, I probably leave like 3 or 4K, and maybe I'll go up to 2,500 if I'm using a sub 5% guy.
And this is mass
But
multi-entry, by the way, right? Mass multi-entry, large field
yeah,
GPPs, just for people out there, just to make sure.
if you look back, when I won the solo 100K, I had two trash players in that. Now, trash in the sense that they were sub 5%, but they were guys that were playing. So I think you could do it. It feels really gross here, but like you could play like a Jawan Jennings and a bad Chiefs pass catcher, or you could even play two of those guys, right? Especially if I think Mahomes MVP playing like two bad pass catchers could get there, right? You could have a weird 4-1 where it's like Mahomes, Kelsey or Rice, McCaffrey, and then like two punt receivers that happen to score 6 and 7 points. And I just think people aren't gonna click that in, and optimizers probably won't find it. And I think that probably translates to DraftKings as well, right? If you were gonna play like Mahomes captain, for example.
Exactly. So let's talk about these guys. And I'm going to go from highest price to lowest price player, these are guys that we have under 20% projected ownership. We've talked about the kickers and defenses. I'll just throw the name, Jack. You give me your thought on if you like them, allocation, etc. Right? So we have Juwan Jennings at 4K on DraftKings. He's not going to run enough routes to be worth 4K, but if he scores a touchdown, Debo gets banged up. Multiple ways he gets there. But just thoughts on Jennings.
Yeah, I'm in. I mean, I think he's an ideal, like, gross play that no one's going to want to use. His optimizer value is terrible. But for a high risk, large field contest, like, he's absolutely the kind of guy that, like, I wouldn't go nuts with it, but I probably, I mean, what do we have him at? Like 5% ownership or something like that? I'm just trying to look.
Yeah, super low.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go double there if I was, like, building 150 lineups.
And if you think about it, right, like, yes, does Jennings project well? No. But can you easily envision a scenario where he outscores the kickers, defenses, and any Chiefs receiver? Yes, that doesn't even seem that crazy at all.
Yeah, and like you said, Samuel is playing, but he's probably not 100% from that shoulder, and he could just get hurt again. They could get down and start throwing more. So yeah, I'm in.
Yeah,
Give me
so
the gross 49ers wide receiver 3.
yes, exactly. MVS and Watson we have relatively popular on DraftKings specifically. FanDuel not as much because of the way the pricing and the structure works. Playing them together obviously is an interesting idea, as you said on FanDuel. No one's going to do it on DraftKings either. Sky Moore. So I think the one thing we have to think about here is, yes, we saw what they did in the conference championship, but there's still Andy Reid with 2 weeks to prepare. It is very possible that any one of Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney if he's active, Richie James, can get a catch or two and be optimal over these other guys. So I think you have to play them. The question is how much.
Yeah, it's tough. I guess I'm curious what you do. Anytime I see these situations where you're guessing at like who's gonna get the snaps and the points, and it could be like what 5 of these Kansas City receivers, and the field is going heavily to 1 or 2 of them. I always just end up like getting under the field and then oftentimes just Xing them out because if they are optimal, one, I might be under the field leverage wise, so I'm less likely to win. And two, the optimal lineups are probably duped, and I don't really. I'm not targeting a duplicated large field lineup anyway. Maybe I'll play that guy in a small field contest where I'm not duplicated like 200 times.
Totally. That is a great way to think about it. Now, perhaps the best leverage play on the entire slate is Elijah Mitchell, running back 2 for San Francisco. We saw him get a late touchdown in the Green Bay game, I believe. If that happens, he has a very good chance of being optimal. And God forbid the scenario where McCaffrey tweaks his calf early. This is a talented running back in a talented offense and could get a breather touchdown just based on how everything sets up. So we have him, I think 1%, 2% projected on both sites because he's in a weird price range because he's projected for like 1 touch. But it's hard to find a better large field leverage play.
Yeah, I love that, and even Hilaire, right? Like Pacheco's not 100%, and I know we don't talk a ton about the like defenses and the matchups and stuff when we're looking at player opportunity, but these are both like top. I'm just looking; they're like top 8 pass defense EPAs and they're bottom 8 run EPAs. I think we have like coaches that will run the ball. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see lineups where these. I mean, what's Mitchell is 2,800. Edwards-Helaire is 18. Yeah, I mean, you could see situations where both of those guys get optimal, even if the starter gets a lot of points.
Exactly. And for the record, the props guy does like CEH receiving overs, so great for PPR scoring like DraftKings, but we do expect him to be one of the more popular value options. Kyle Juszczyk seems like an obvious, important game, going to play a decent amount, pass catching fullback at $800 on DraftKings and whatever his price is on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, he got at least one down the field target against the Lions, so he'll run routes. I think you bring up a great point. You said it twice now. Guy that's semi-popular in DraftKings and like 0 owned on FanDuel. And we mentioned that before. That's a great way to take advantage of FanDuel because yes, the scoring and the pricing is such that they are worse plays, but when the difference in ownership is like 15 to 1, those are times you can take. Like if a guy is good enough to be 15% on DraftKings, odds are he's at least a little bit live for FanDuel. So I'm also heavily so Juszczyk is a prime example of a guy like that where we have him around the 10-12% mark on DraftKings, so he'll probably be like 1% owned on FanDuel.
Yeah, and by the way, he was optimal the last time these two teams met in the Super Bowl, so if you're into that sort of thing. All right, I think that is all for the guys who are playing. What about guys like running back threes? Jordan Mason, LaMichael P. Ryan, wide receiver fours and fives, Ray McLeod, Chris Conley. Those two project maybe for a half point or a point. Tight end twos, Charlie Warner, tight end three, Braden Willis. Like, I know it's a lot of people in the contest, but are you the type of guy that's going to play those guys?
I'm not. I think maybe once upon a time I would, and I'm curious. I mean, I guess you don't do a lot of mass multi-injury, but for me, like I'm looking for what's the biggest uncertainty that I can play into, and to me, that's the Kansas City pass catchers. Like we've got a bunch. It's nothing new, right? We told the story for several videos. Bunch of active guys. We don't know who's going to get the ball, but they're all going to play, and they're all pretty low owner, for the most part. So to me, I'd be just looking to hit that hard and get significantly over the field on like the 1 to 5% guys there, and then mostly just play chalk to round it out. You could play those other guys, but I just think there's a less of an edge of knowing that any of those guys you just mentioned are going to even play at all.
Exactly. I think the one guy that maybe is a little bit different is Jordan Mason, the running back three. We've seen him have a role when CMC is out. So if CMC did happen to leave early, Elijah Mitchell won't get all the touches. So I think you set a rule max one of CMC and Jordan Mason. If you decided to include him in your player pool, I think that's much more likely than any of these other guys.
Yeah, I like that. All right, I think one thing we haven't talked about, and it probably applies to both sides, is thoughts on the lower owned captains. Right, we talked about how to get different with McCaffrey and Mahomes, with bad pass catchers, with zero quarterback, with the team overstacking. So let's talk about I guess we'll start with DraftKings here. So if I look at ownership, the under 10% captains, we have. So I'll just name some of these guys off, and you tell me what your thoughts are at captain on DraftKings. Brock Purdy, 8%.
I don't love it, but he is rushing more. So maybe he scrambles into a touchdown. His prices makes it kind of difficult. If he was in the 8K range, yes, 10K is a little too much, I think.
Okay. Checo, also in the 8%.
For sure, absolutely, all day.
Love that one. And that's probably, I'm guessing, knowing you, that's going to be a primo small field target for you.
Love that.
Yeah, that's just, I saw that one. I was like, that's a Brian play. All right, now we have the all three 49ers stud pass catchers, Samuel, Kittle, Ayuk, amazingly 5% or less at captain on DraftKings. That's just, that reading that out loud just seems unbelievable.
Absolute no-brainer, right? Because they're technically overpriced when all of them are in, right? Pacheco and Rice are cheaper, so we're not going to get heavy ownership on Debo, Ayuk, or Kittle. All these guys have 3 touchdown upside, specifically Debo and Kittle. I just don't think there's a large field strategy that is proper without going overweight on those guys.
I almost just want to be like, forget everything we just said in the last 30 minutes, and just literally just play those three guys and Pacheco at captain, and you're done.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, man. I guess that'd be my prefer. I almost might play the slate now. This just looks, gosh.
Well, the question is, right, like, would you rather play 8% owned, like an 8% chance that Pacheco or less that Debo, Ayuk, Kittle is a high scoring player on the slate and or the optimal captain based on their pricing, or 8% use check being optimal, 8% Richie James or whoever the hell else is going to be, 8% Jawan Jennings, right? Like, you put it that way, it seems a lot better for the captain angle.
Yeah, it does, and I mean, I don't know, I'm guessing if you were going to do this on DraftKings like mass multi-entry, you'd probably want to just spread out and play like at least those four. Maybe you throw Kelsey in at 10% or something, but yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Rashee Rice is the obvious value, so that's where the ownership goes, and so yeah, I think we just highlighted that. All right, so let's any other DraftKings captains you want to highlight, or do you want to switch to FanDuel?
No, I think that covers it. I was looking at mid-range guys or cheaper guys, and that just feels heavily duplicated and or bad. So I think you stick to those guys.
Okay, switching over to FanDuel, it's obviously going to be more exaggerated ownership here. So we have McCaffrey 45-ish%, Mahomes 27. If he ticked higher, I think we see this in Super Bowls, right? People like more casual players, they'll play Mahomes. Then we got a big gap. Purdy checks in at 11 on FanDuel. Any more interest in Purdy, or similarly just out?
That feels like less interest, even more there. So
Yeah, having watched him play, yeah. All right, and now it gets fun. So Kelsey, we have just 8.
easy.
Easy. And then it just gets just hilarious. Rashee Rice, this is a great example, right? Rashee Rice, super chalky captain on DraftKings, 3% on FanDuel.
Right.
Is he really, if he's the optimal DraftKings captain, is he 5 times less likely to be the optimal FanDuel captain
No.
or MVP?
Good way
No.
to look at it.
Okay, and then those same guys we just mentioned. Debo 2%, Ayuk 1%, Kittle 1%. Again, maybe they'll be 3 instead of 1, but for our purposes, those guys are basically unowned. I'm guessing you're liking all those guys for FanDuel too.
I mean, Debo's got to be the best player of the century at 3% MVP on FanDuel, where he gets rushing points, and you can play zero quarterback because the likelihood he runs one in is pretty high, and you get more different that way. I mean, dude, again, like you said, you can ignore a lot of what we said and just play this, and that's the best leverage angle you'll have in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think the way you put it, like, what's more likely, one of those guys being optimal or one of these trashy guys being optimal? Like, it seems like a no-brainer to me that these low-owned elite 3 touchdown upside guys
Yes.
being optimal is more likely. And dude, once upon a time, Debo was like a 20+% MVP on
Yes.
like every San Francisco slate.
Yes.
He's 2%. I mean,
Yep.
he's the same player, right? Like,
Yep. And you get 2 weeks to get healthier with that shoulder. I don't know, man. Seems like the easiest play. I'm recording this. We're recording this before I actually made the cover for the YouTube. So I think Debo's got to be the cover boy for the YouTube YouTube photo now. So
and maybe like the quarterbacks with a big red X
yeah,
or something.
yeah, get that through the algorithm. So all right. So I think that'll do it for this video. One final talk, just really quickly, Jack. I know we mentioned it a couple times, but contest selection, yes, there's the big allure of the $1 million prizes on both sites, but there are tons of other great contests at various price points. So I would just urge people, and I don't know if you looked through the lobby yet, but tons of great contests. Urge people to pick contests within your bankroll. Don't just target the $1 million payday, despite how flashy it is.
Yeah, I mean, even FanDuel, which doesn't usually have as nice, they have a 444 mass multi-entry with 50K up top. I mean, that's a pretty nice. I might even play that contest too. So that's if you're looking for, you're grinding your 150, you got a bankroll you built up, and you want to take a little bit of a shot, but you can't, you don't want to jam it all in for the million. That's an awesome contest to play. I mean, I'm sure DraftKings probably has similar kind of cheap to mid-range
Yep.
mass multi-entry, in addition to all the awesome, your bread and butter, the 3 max single entry kind of stuff.
Yep, in small field, and then God forbid your lineup that is optimal in the smaller 150 max it would have won the million. Then you can just never get online ever again.
Yeah, so you have to enter it, right? That's like the cardinal rule. Yeah.
Definitely. So, all right, guys, that does it for this video. The daily plug will be up Friday evening or Saturday morning. That will be a written roadmap to the slate. Our writer Bismo will go through every angle that you could possibly think of to give you lineup construction tips for various contest types, as well as rankings for DraftKings and FanDuel. Our model is up with projected ownership. All the stuff we referenced in this video is up on OccupyFantasy.com. And our lineup builder is up, ready for you to build up to 300 lineups using optimal lineup criteria. All the rules we discuss, all the salary rules, put them right into the builder, spit them out, get them exactly how you want. So you can follow Jack on Twitter at DFS_Magic_. I'm at Brian Jester FF, also at Occupy Fantasy. Yes, I know this is the last NFL video of the season. First of all, we appreciate all of you that were along for the ride. We appreciate your support and watching these videos every week. But we're going to have some best ball videos coming out pretty soon. Other sports, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel, get notified when that goes live. And if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Now, this is Wednesday evening. Plenty of time to answer your questions. Comment on the video below if you have questions about the slate, questions about lineups. Give us your predictions. We'd love to hear them. And our Discord server is open, ready to chat. So for Jack, I'm Brian. Thank you for listening, and good luck in Super Bowl 58.